Welcome to A Window on SAHMRI, where we take you inside South Australia's independent not-for-profit health and medical research institute. Each episode, we get to know the people driving our life-changing research, getting into what motivates them personally and how their work is delivering a brighter, healthier future for all.
Ben, what first got you into science?
I'm not really sure. I think I'm just a naturally curious person. Like, I've always been that kid who wanted to know how things worked and sort of try and take things apart and work out what made them work and understand, how the world around us was sort of operating. So I think it was just that extension of like that natural curiosity that I had. And I guess, a lot of people and a lot of scientists in particular have as a kid. It was just, how can I keep asking questions and how can I, start finding out the answers to those myself? And that sort of led me into science, I think.
And there's a bit of an artistic side to you as well, with stage productions and that sort of thing. How do those two worlds collide?
Yeah, that was probably a little bit unexpected. I'm never really, I think, realized that I had that. I've always been interested in like writing and things like that and creating my own stories, I guess, as a kid. And I'm sort of only just realizing that now as we talk about it. But yeah, as a kid and at school, I did like writing. I did like, writing stories and creating things like that. But yeah, my sort of interest in science communication, I guess, came from doing my PhD at university. So I've got a PhD in skin cancer biology and molecular pharmacology. Very fancy way of saying I was trying to work out how skin cancers grow and die.
Yeah, we can see the science communication right there.
Yeah, exactly. And then it sort of got to the point where I was doing a little bit of teaching on the side of my PhD, which is pretty common for PhD students. It's how a lot of us earn a little bit of extra money on the side, and sort of enjoying that. And then the university would have these public sort of outreach events or public information events, and I would sort of go and speak at those. And it just sort of built and built and built. And then when I got to the end of my PhD, I realized I enjoyed talking about science much more than doing science. And I wondered if I could get paid to do that. So I was sort of in the right place at the right time and sort of moved into science communication, which was sort of taking off as a bit of a field around that time. And then just sort of through that process of like, liking to tell stories, liking science and just trying to share my excitement about how things work, just sort of came out in different forms and did come out as, moving into video production and learning how to do that and showing how, working out how to show science in a visual way and not just talk about it. And then what you hinted at there was a stage show. So my first sort of science communication roles were much more around like live events. And then there was a point in probably roughly 2012 or so, a comedian who would end up being a pretty good friend of mine sort of came to me one day and he was like, I've always wanted to do this sort of like science show about Doctor Who. I can do the Doctor Who bit, but I can't do the science bit. Like, do you want to work together on that? So the two of us sort of sat down and worked out what a kind of a stage comedy science show about Doctor Who would look like, and sort of wrote that together and built that up. And we got some scientists, some physicists, some astronomers, and those sort of people in to help us with that. And then, I ended up sort of producing and directing this stage show. So I've always sort of been a person who's just sort of gone with the vibe and like, oh, that sounds interesting. Let's give that a shot. And so, I sort of found
side quests.
Yeah, exactly. And sometimes your side quest ends up being your main quest, which is, unexpected. It was sort of this, there was a point where I sort of was producing this comedy science stage show, and I was watching a performance of it one day. I was sitting there and like, how did I get here? I'm meant to be a scientist, and now I'm sort of producing this stage show. So,
but people came to watch though.
Fun. Yeah, it was insanely, like, surprisingly successful. It was called Science of Fiction Doctor Who, and it sort of evolved into a stage show called The Science of Doctor Who. So we first did our first performances of it in a tiny little town in the middle of nowhere, Victoria, called Natimuc. But they've got a little bit of an arts festival that pops up. We went and we did it at this arts festival. The Natimuc is about 180 people, and I think we had about 180 people turn up to the show. So we're like, oh, we're kind of onto something good here. So then we did it at the Adelaide Fringe. I think did 2 or 3 shows at the Adelaide Fringe. Went off, did it at National Science Week in Canberra. And then we sort of got onto the radar of the BBC. And there's a lot more of a story that goes into that. But after a lot of negotiations with the BBC, we ended up doing it in conjunction with them, but touring it around the country as a fairly large-scale show. So that very much was a point there of taking it from these sort of smaller festivals to being, a feature show in theatres with 600-700 seats. Very much a very rapid introduction of like, how do you sort of create a stage show on that sort of scale that meets that sort of like expectation. And I think that's the sort of thing. Like I'm just one of those people who endlessly wants to learn new things. I think that's sort of where that sort of creativity comes into it as well. It's like, it's new side quest. All right, we can learn how to do something new here.
And it was obviously a good idea for that many people to come and watch.
Yeah. I mean, it was insanely successful, surprisingly. 14 shows around the country in all the mainland capitals, I think it was. Yeah, 14 shows. 400, 500, 600 people, audiences at each show. So yeah, really, really popular. And that it sort of showed how I think there is this, obviously you can tying in the pop culture always really, really works, but bringing in, the comedian and that sort of comedic element to it, it was very heavy science, in it, but the way we talk about science, the way we make it relevant, the way we make it, relevant to people's interests. In that case, we're using Doctor Who, we're using pop culture. But I think that's, very important just as a general science communication concept. Like, how do you make this relevant to your audience? Because they'll go with you to a lot of places if you are showing how it's actually relevant to them as an audience.
Just go a bit deeper into science communication. You mentioned that you started off doing a lot more of those live presentations and helping researchers with those skills.
Yeah.
Just tell us a bit about how you did that and what that involved and the kinds of things that you would teach researchers.
I've been in science communication for a little while now. So like I said, started off in live events, obviously ended up doing some quite successful projects with there, moved into videos and documentaries. I've always been a writer and worked as a journalist for a bit. I've done a lot of radio around the country. And then, for the last sort of 4 or 5 years, working I was missing science. I was missing research a little bit. I was sort of always on the outside looking in those sort of roles. So how can I sort of get a little bit back closer to science? So I've been back working closer with researchers and helping researchers talk about what they do and, explain why what they do is actually important to whatever audience they're talking to. So I think, it always comes down to the audience. Science communication as a scientist it's not really about you. It's about the audience. So you start with, okay, who is my audience? What are they actually interested in? Why should they even listen to me? Why is this important or relevant or even just interesting to them? And then work backwards from there, right? What's the best story that I have that meets those expectations of the audience or fits what sort of stuff they might actually want or want to hear about? And I think that's one of the really, really big things and a trap that a lot of scientists, including myself, and every now and again I have to pull myself back from this, but a trap that a lot of scientists fall into is we are really, really excited about the work that we do. And we get, all right, let me tell you all about what I do. No. Don't tell me the whole story. Just tell me the best story. So what's the best story that you have to tell for that audience that fits those expectations? It might mean that you are leaving out stuff that you think is really interesting, but it's not actually relevant for that audience. But again, it's not about you; it's about the audience that you're actually there to meet and communicate with.
And it depends a lot on that audience, of course, if they're academic or they're donors or they're lay audience.
Exactly. You need to sort of approach it in quite a fine sort of detail. So there's, a lot of people are like, I want to talk to the general public. Well, I've been sort of arguing for a while that the general public doesn't actually exist, right? Their general public is split up into all sorts of little niche audiences. And you sort of need to work out, right, what is that niche that I'm actually trying to reach here? people who have absolutely no interest in science and do not want to hear about medical research, well, you're not going to try to reach them, so that, let's remove them off the table. Are they people who are, patients, for example, or maybe carers or family members of people who have a particular condition? Are they clinicians? Are they people who are just what I call science curious? They're the people kind of like me who are just curious about, they have an interest in science and they, just want to find out more. And that's just like, that's the form of media that they like. And they're the curious people. They might not know anything particular or specific about science, but they're curious about science. So there's, a population there. So you start sort of niching your audience a little bit closer and closer and closer to work out, right, who exactly am I talking to? So yeah, I'm always, if I am doing a project or if I get invited or asked to go and speak somewhere or produce something, I'm always sort of asking fairly specific questions about who the actual audience is so I can get that messaging right and get the best story for that audience across.
What about your PhD experience impacted the way that you approach science communication?
Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily say I was an amazing communicator as a PhD. I'm as a PhD student, I guess I must have been because the uni kept asking me to go and speak at various things. But yeah, I don't think I really understood a lot of the nuances of science communication.
You were enthusiastic.
Exactly. I was enthusiastic and like excitable about it, but was I really approaching it the best way? Yeah, that is very true. Yeah, there's nothing worse than, going and seeing someone and they're like, we did this and then we did this and then we did this. I'm like, if you're not excited about it, dude, why would I be?
That's right. But sometimes people don't understand that's the way that they're coming across.
Yeah, well, you
have to act even more excited than you are.
Yeah, exactly. And bring that, and part of that is just telling the audience when you're excited about things. Like, so we got this result. And it's super exciting because finally, after whatever the story is, and it gives those sort of moments, but you can even just tell the audience when you're excited or why things were exciting to you, and they'll buy into that. So was I necessarily approaching that the best way when I was a PhD student? Probably not, but it did sort of get me in front of audiences and working out how to sort of start talking about science. I think doing some of the teaching during my PhD was actually a big benefit because there was a lot of stuff where I was explaining concepts and explaining processes and things like that to undergrad students. So there was that, but also how do you make it entertaining out of that? Where can you crack jokes that actually add to your description or is it a joke just for joke's sake? That can be okay. Is it a joke that builds on it and actually helps? Is it a joke that detracts? Stuff like that. How do you make it entertaining? It doesn't have to be jokes. Where can you use stories? All those sort of experiences come into it. And there was a lot of like learning from doing, I think, in those early years.
And not something that many scientists are naturally thinking about.
No. And I think that, looking back, if there was one piece of advice I'd probably give myself, and was I sort of accidentally doing it? Maybe. But every time you do something, every time you communicate science or what you're doing, try something different. Like if it works, great, do it again. If it doesn't work, it doesn't matter. People probably won't even remember. That's fine. But try something different and experiment. We're scientists. We're meant to be good at experimenting and trying out new things and form a hypothesis, test a hypothesis, see what the results are, and just apply that same process to communication. And it sort of keeps things a bit fun and fresh for you if you have a new idea of like, I could try this, give it a shot. And yes, see what works and what doesn't. So I think, that's a really sort of, I guess, quick-ish way for researchers and scientists to start developing their own unique style.
Yeah, you can think outside the box and you don't necessarily have to deliver in whatever formulaic way you feel like scientists are supposed to present.
And that's one of these sort of things that I caution people about, that just the way it's always been done doesn't mean it's the best way, right? So how can you break out of that? Just because that's how your supervisor did it, or that's how you're seeing other researchers do it, doesn't mean it's the best way of doing it. There is a lot of flexibility in how you sort of approach that and apply different ideas. You always want to, depending on the setting and again, depending on the audience, that will change and the application of that will change. And you pitch it slightly different for different audiences, and you might try some stuff for the general public that you wouldn't necessarily try for other scientists. But, that sort of, approach of just because that's how you've always seen seminars being done doesn't mean that that's the best way of doing it. And doesn't mean that's the best way of doing it for you either. Working out, well, what is my style? How am I coming across exactly as you said
And
before?
why do you think that's important? Like if I see my colleague does it a certain way and people respond well to that, and I'm not really similar to my colleague, but I'll just try to copy what they do, why would you not recommend that?
Well, I think you can give it a shot, because you might not necessarily realize that it's not your way of doing it until you give it a shot, or you might not realize that it is your way of doing it until you give it a shot. But you need to do what's comfortable too. But you as a scientist, you as a communicator are part of the message as well. Part of the way that audiences connect with the message that you're trying to give out, which is whatever knowledge you're trying to share with an audience. The part of the way that the audience will connect with that message is by connecting with you as a person. So what they see in you as a person, what they see in you, with your personality coming out and things like that, those sort of personal connection points of like, oh yeah, this person seems friendly, or this person seems nice, or I like the way they, sort of joke around things. A lot of this stuff is sort of subconscious. We're not, as an audience, we're not sitting there naturally thinking about it, but we are essentially trying to decide whether or not we are going to connect with you as a person. And if we connect with you, that's, increases how much we actually connect with your message. How do, a lot of like pseudoscience and stuff like that, how does a lot of that break through? It's because a lot of the people who talk about this stuff are relatively charismatic, or at least relatively charismatic to a certain wedge of the audience. This is how this sort of works. Like that receptiveness to the message is part of how receptive an audience is to you as well. So trying that out and finding out what persona, what kind of person am I on stage, and where can I sort of take that? What parts of my personality can I boost up or flatten out a little bit to create that person who an audience will connect with and trust as they're doing it.
But then you don't want to create this like alter ego probably person. Like you probably want it to be you. And I suppose you don't want it to be so overpowering that it's not about the science. So it's a bit of a balance.
Yeah, exactly. And not making it so that it's the Callum show. It's still, you are there as a conduit for your message, right? You're trying to share the knowledge that you have generated. Having said that, I don't do this, but every time we will go on stage, we do have a persona. It's a version of ourselves. It's not necessarily the exact same as the person we are off stage. I have an on-stage persona. Other people have an on-stage persona. Everyone does. I do know some people who have created essentially completely different personas to be that they are on stage. So they drop into a completely different character. And that's one that they have specifically made and curated for the purpose of presenting on stage.
And that can work?
It can work. And I'm thinking of one person in particular who might be watching. Hello, you know who you are. Who hated presenting on stage so much, like full-on panic attacks, really, really, physically anti-getting on stage, really not enjoying it. And they created a completely different persona. They created basically a character that they could become who was confident on stage, who didn't, and they pieced this person out and had a very, very clear picture of who this person would be. So when they went on stage, they weren't their normal name. Let's say they weren't David. They went on stage and they were Brian. And Brian was this presenter extraordinaire, this person who was confident. And by actually separating it out, it meant that anything that happened on stage, anything negative that happened on stage didn't happen to the person. It didn't happen to Dave. It happened to Brian. So it didn't matter. So they could actually split it out. Once they got past that fear response they're having on stage, they started winding back Brian a little bit and adding a little bit more Dave, and ended up being that they were back to being a persona of Dave on stage.
Interesting.
I've only heard one or two people sort of do that, but it can actually work quite successfully. I'm not sure I could pull that off. I don't think I'm that good of an actor.
So if I'm a researcher though, and I'm anxious on the stage and I'm hearing this, what would you say? Should I be doing that? It seems pretty complicated.
It is, and it's not like just something you can just snap into. And if you have a presentation tomorrow, I don't think that's gonna work for you. Look into something called personas. Do a lot of reading. I'm more than happy to talk to people about this as well. But look into personas and do reading around personas and work out how you can actually create these personas as well. One thing that can sort of help you create that persona, whether it's that extreme persona or whether it's just that slight little shift away from who you are into this, your presenting self, is look at people. Presenters, for example, who you like watching, and whether that's people in science or outside, but start, taking notes of what is it that you actually like about when they're presenting stylistically, or how they come across, or the language they use, or, how they move around, or how they use their voice, whatever it might be. Start noting down the things that you like about one presenter, and then just look at a couple of different presenters who you like watching. And you'll start realizing that there's common things between those three presenters. It's like, they all use their voice in the same way. And then go back and review your own style. So ask someone to record your next presentation and do that same sort of note taking of, okay, how can I sort of like tweak, my presenting style to be more like that style that I sort of like. And then through that sort of process of sort of creating and curating your presentation style, you are also essentially creating this presentation persona that you will drop into. It's not that massive step away, and that's the most extreme I've ever heard of. But we all have a slightly different self that we become on stage. You can create and design what that self is, whether it's a small step or something a little bit bigger.
What do you get out of helping researchers with these skills that is satisfying for you?
A lot of it is, I love finding out new stuff. I do have that just insatiable curiosity. So part of it is I get to work with researchers and just learn stuff myself, which is kind of cool for people like me. But yeah, I think having sat on both sides of the table as a scientist and as, a science communicator and as a journalist, and that sort of, outside perspective looking in, and now also that middle sort of ground that I am, seeing how important what we are actually producing in the lab is, how much it can change people's lives, and just sharing that knowledge. So a large amount of what I do, I do a lot of stuff around how you communicate to the public as well. But a large amount of what I do is just how scientists communicate with other scientists. And that's really like the first step we have to get right. Even before we start talking about how do you do a great public presentation, how do you present to other scientists? Because generating knowledge is the most important part of being a scientist. That's why we do experiments. We produce some results. We do an analysis of that results, and that creates a new piece of knowledge. Sharing that knowledge is the second most important part of being a scientist, right? Knowledge that's stuck in a lab is not very useful. Knowledge only gets value when it's shared and can be built on and be taken further by yourselves and by others. So that process of making your research actually valuable and creating impact, that's the term that gets bandied around a lot. Research that has impact is knowledge that is shared and shared effectively and produces, and can be taken further. So if you want, as a scientist, and as I said, being a scientist myself as well, realizing this, if you want your research to actually be as useful as it can be, you need to be able to share it effectively to other scientists and to other people, whether that's philanthropists, obviously, because we would like them to support our work, or to government, or to policymakers, or to other doctors or clinicians, or whoever it might be, or the public, or patients, whoever it might be. But it still always comes down to the fact that you're sharing that knowledge, and that is the second most important part of being a scientist. So I do it because I love telling stories. I do it because I love finding out new things. But I also do it because I realize that this is how we make medical research, something that's very close to my heart, how we make that actually as valuable and as useful as we can.
And I think when scientists are able to do that effectively, and they might often start out apprehensive, because part of the reason you and I have jobs is because most scientists don't feel all that confident with the communication side of things. But as people build their confidence and they do some media and they put their work out there and they get good results, from what I've seen, they really develop that confidence and those skills, and their careers trend upwards.
So yeah, it is that experiment of how can I do this in a different way? I don't feel comfortable doing it that way. How can I maybe do it in a different way that I am more comfortable with, or gets me over that moment? So yeah, there is that sort of just like first initial hump that you need to get over. There are training programs as well, and I run a bunch of training programs within SAHMRI around, okay, how can we actually create, that not only the skill development so that you're feeling more capable, but also that that confidence development as well, so that you're actually putting it in practice. You're realizing that there is fun in communicating what you do. There is fun in presenting. Amazingly enough, it does exist. And sort of get past that point so that you can then go on and develop yourself.
Well explained. Outside of all of this, you're a father of young twins.
Yeah.
How do you do it all?
With a lot of difficulty and not much sleep and a lot of coffee. Yeah. So I've got 4.5-year-old twins at home, boy and girl. They are brilliant. They are awesome. They are probably my most difficult communication project. Every morning, just trying to get them to put their shoes on.
You get to brush up on your skills.
Yeah, exactly. How do you convince if you can convince a 4.5-year-old to put on their shoes in the morning, you can probably convince anyone of anything about your work. But yeah, it is a lot. It's a lot all the time, but it's a really kind of cool disconnect. And the great thing about kids and young kids is it's kind of annoying in the moment, but it is also fun at the same time, because they're also going into that, why does this happen? Why is that sort of thing? So
and if they take after your curiosity, there'll be a lot of that.
Yeah, exactly. I'm pretty sure I've got at least one engineer in the works who will take apart absolutely everything he can get his hands on and try to put it back together again. But yeah, it's that, that constant questioning. There's one big hump that science communicators and scientists as well, and we have, and it takes work to get past, is just being comfortable saying I don't know. So that's with the kids as well. It's like, why does this happen? I don't know, dude, but let's find out. Let's work out what that is. And I think being there is an element of practice of just doing that and doing that with the kids, and then feeling more comfortable doing that with other people as well. Like, you know what? I actually don't know. Let's find out.
I like that. And when it's just dad's time, the motorsport is on in various forms.
Yes. Yeah. I am very much motorsport obsessed. I cricket and motorsport, but motorsport probably eats up most of my time.
One very slow, one very fast.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, the both ends of the scale there, isn't it? But yeah, I'm massively into Formula One. Been into Formula One since a very, very, very young age. So I've been a Williams fan because I got into Formula One when Williams was successful. So it's been a lean few decades, but that's part of the fun of being a fan.
We love the underdog.
Yeah, exactly. And then, yeah, pretty much any other form where if it's got wheels and they keep score, I'm kind of into it.
Cool. Well, thanks for that insight, Ben. I think that's good for people to hear about that level of detail on presenting, and probably giving some people some ideas of looking into personas or thinking about their own style and the importance of developing that.
And I'm always up for a chat as well. This is the thing. I'm always up for a chat. So let's talk. I like talking. I like talking about research. I like talking about science. So let's talk more.
So where can people find you if they do want to chat about presenting or communicating?
Easiest way to get in touch with me is just with my SAHMRI email, which is benjamin.lewis@sahmri.com. And you can find me. I'm normally wandering around the building somewhere. I'm either on level 6 or I'm on level 8 or I'm somewhere in between. But yeah, you'll see me around somewhere. Shoot me an email and I'll make some time.
Thanks, Ben.
No problem. Thank you.
If you want to learn more about SAHMRI and the researchers working to build a brighter, healthier future for you and your family, head to sahmri.org.au.